Welcome to the What It Takes podcast, where we talk to successful entrepreneurs, leaders, and CEOs across different industries. I'm your host, Darren, and in each episode, we're going to figure out how they got through difficult times, but most importantly, what it really takes to succeed. So whether you're just starting out your career or you're looking to level up your business game, my goal is to give you real insights and practical lessons from people who have achieved what you want. Hey everyone, welcome back to the What It Takes podcast. I am joined today by Renate Straume, or Renate Straume, who is someone who has started her own company focused on reducing carbon footprints. Now, you actually came from public administration as well as you had a little bit of a law background as well.
Not really law, more like civil engineering.
Civil engineering, yes. Renate, first of all, a huge welcome to you today. And second of all, could you please give the audience a little bit of an introduction in terms of what exactly is it that you do today?
Well, today I am a jack of all trades. I basically am the CEO and founder of a company called Varig.
Mhm.
We are I guess you could say, sustainability platform. We provide a sustainability solution that really professionalizes and simplifies the gathering of data from buildings, reporting within the sustainability frameworks when you have buildings. And we've also added a function where you can measure the impact of the improvements that you really should be working on if you have buildings today.
Okay. I'm curious to build up to the point where you started with this company, but let's first go back to your early life. You mentioned that you were doing civil engineering.
Yeah. I guess that's actually not an entirely correct translation. It's called that in Norwegian, but it doesn't translate particularly well. So it's more like Masters of Engineering within Building and Construction.
Okay, yes. And that was your studies, but if I understood it correctly, you also studied a few other things as well, didn't you not?
Yep. I have a somewhat unusual background in the sense that I went to drama school first in London. I lived
Mhm.
there for a few years afterwards and I couldn't really live off doing acting and some directing within theatre. Just life brought me back to Norway and did a few other jobs and decided to go the opposite way of most people and go back to school and the more sort of hard sciences and get a master's in engineering. So, yeah. Um,
What
I probably have had more jobs than most in the sense that I've been anything from I had a holiday job once as chimney sweep, which is
a,
kind of odd.
what?
A chimney sweep.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
quite literally.
That
Going up
is
on top of roofs and sweeping sweep.
yeah.
And then I've done acting in theatre and movies and got paid for some jobs, but not enough to live off. So I don't really say that I've ever been a professional actor because then you have to be
Yeah.
able to live off it.
Yes.
Yeah, any and all jobs that you have when you're trying to make a living as an actor. Mostly, I guess, waitressing. I was in a fancy restaurant. I was the hostess that welcomed people, etc. So
Hmm.
yeah, many different jobs.
So many different jobs. And throughout this journey, I mean, obviously you did the acting in London, you came back to Norway, started to study again,
Mhm.
and that was when you did the Masters of Engineering, not the civil engineering, but
Well,
rather,
there is a bit of civil engineering within that master's, but not like this
yeah.
traditional just outside engineering.
And what led you to want to do that? What was the
I
desire, the drive to kind of get back to studies instead of pursuing
I
traditional work?
was maitre d', I guess you'd say, in a quite a nice restaurant in Norway. And I remember saying to one of my friends, I used sort of either have to go the hotel route or sort of get another education. I don't necessarily know what I want to do. And this was when I was about 26, I think.
Hmm.
And I'd also realized that I like sleeping at night. I don't like
Yeah,
working at night.
yeah. You
I
and
like
me
to get up
both.
in the morning. I'm a morning
Yes.
bird.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine said, "Why don't you build bridges?" Because I knew I had this sort of slightly crazy, very sort of creative side, and then you have the sort of mathematical, quite good at school. I mean, never struggled with that, and then you sort of And I was doing this between the two of them, and she was just thinking building bridges between them. I took her literally, and I said, "Why not build bridges?" And I figured what I needed to be build bridges, and not actually. Well, I'm like in a sense building a bridge between a very non like technified industry with the building and construction industry and tech industry. I am sort of figuratively building bridges, but
Yes.
never actually built that many bridges within
Yeah.
my sort of engineering
I
side.
was going to ask you about that. I was wondering, did you go and end up building any bridges? But
Not apart from the classic sort of matchstick bridges that you build, some of the fun projects that you have, where you have a competition to build the bridge that sort of
I've
falls down
seen
the last
those.
with the more. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that is actually something that you do.
They are quite fun actually, the
Yeah,
ones that I've seen. And so you finish your studies. Because a master's here in Norway, that's 2 years, right?
this is an integrated master's, so it's 5.
It's 5 years. Okay, so
Yeah,
by the time you finish this, you're now in your early
yeah.
somewhere around there, and now you go back to work. What happens next?
Well, I went back to work and I started working for a rådgivningsingeniør. It's completely stuck in my head what it's called.
Middle
So
evening. It's like
consultant engineer.
consultant. Yeah, yeah, consultant
And
engineer.
did that for a few years. Very quickly I got this wonderful mentor who was in his late 60s at the time,
Hmm.
and ended up working with him for a few years in the really, really big construction projects and planning stages, design and planning stages, and did a lot of planning, cost calculations, project management, that kind of thing, and really quite enjoyed it. And then had a few babies too.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I worked, figured I wanted to sort of expand my professional basis a little bit. So I went over on the building side of things and worked for a contractor for a few years as a project manager on building sites. So much fun.
Hmm.
I love building sites. So much sort of half organized chaos and everyone just sort of moving forward, and it's action and fun. And sometimes a little bit too much chaos, but that's beside the point. And then my first employer called me and asked if I wanted to come back in a sort of, I guess the equivalent is a C-level management position. And I sort of said, sure, let's, and then did the interview process, of course, and got the job, and ended up going back to my first employer as
Hmm.
the sort of head of building and construction unit within that company.
Incredible.
And yeah, that's the sort of route that I was there until another bigger company bought us, and then
Uh-huh.
part of the transition process. And then I figured this is a good time to be crazy and make
And
these ideas
yes,
in my mind a reality.
this right here, right? That transition, that feeling or thought that you got, what led you to transition from working in this business to then deciding, hey, I'm going to start my own business. What was going through your head? Was it an opportunity? Was it like, I'm feeling crazy, I'm just going to go and do this? What was it?
Probably more the second one, I'd say. And luckily, you don't realize how crazy you are when you start a business of your own.
Yeah.
No, I'd been in charge of making and implementing a new project model for the whole company of that for
Mm.
that consultant engineering company, whereas I was in the management team. And I'd really seen firsthand how really technology can kind of super speed cultural change.
Mm.
And this was also the sort of very early stage where the first AI kind of products started popping up. Space
Mm.
Maker
Mm.
came on the scene just sort of as I was finishing off this, seeing the effect of a not perfect. We supported the implementation of this new project model with the system after a little while. I mean, there was no change without the system. And
Mm.
then once people had to use the system and was followed up on every month, then all of a sudden this transition happened and the effects were formidable. I mean, it was like night and day. I mean, people
Mm.
hated the system, but
Yeah.
it worked.
Yeah.
It really worked.
Yes.
So even though it's a bit, the system itself wasn't cumbersome because it's simplified a lot of things, but it forced everyone to do what they said they would do but didn't do.
Yeah, that's just laziness though, no, isn't it?
No, but
Would you
it's
not say so?
life. I mean, when you come to work and everyone, like, all the people want their reports, and you sort of have to fix everything, and you don't really want, sort of, everyone sees that they have to change, but you don't really
Yeah.
want to in your
Yeah.
everyday life, because, oh, I just have to do this. I don't know how to do this. I'll just do it this time, this once.
Mm,
And all of a sudden you're stuck back in the same
mm,
way of doing things. It's not
mm,
because you don't want to, it's just because life.
mm,
It's just tough.
mm,
And then all of a sudden, once someone, you had to give someone a little bit of input, and the rest was just measured. So
mm,
you, every sort of deviance kind of got exposed so much sooner, that you sort of automatically just started doing things more correct.
mhm.
And yeah, that's really the power of technology. It's making sure that you start doing things the way you're supposed to do them a little sooner. It's very rarely the system itself that is some magic bullet. It just facilitates that the change happens a little bit faster.
Yeah, it makes it
And
easier, more effective.
yeah, so this is really the sort of background, and then you sort of the sort of dawn of the sort of AI real products that had an element of smartness. I mean, real AI, I don't know, but it was good enough to be able to
Yeah.
sort of withstand that the shining light.
Yes.
Sorry. So this was then, I think, summer in 18.
Uh-huh.
And then I quit, and I had a few paying clients for sort of early stage property development, back of the envelope cost calculations, and just advising, earning a little bit of money. And then I think on the 10th of October in 2018, I sort of incorporated the company, and then I sort of went out and tried to make something of it to get investors, etc. And then in February 2019, I shook hands with the initial, I'd say almost co-founder, but the initial investor that came in with really sort of as an incubator.
Uh-huh.
So they helped co-found, they helped sort of to be an incubator for the ideas that I brought to them. That was what was to become Varig. So really, I mean, I'm not going to take credit for all of it, because they were amazing, North Lab, and they're very, very different now.
But what was the initial idea that you came to them with? Because you obviously had the system that you built that, and it worked, and it,
The initial idea was a was to use technology to facilitate change and to make buildings more sustainable.
Mhm.
So, because I'd done an analysis of the industry, and also established some sort of groundbreaking issues, sort of not groundbreaking, but issues that permeated the industry,
Yes.
and also then within those issues, they are too broad to
Mm,
solve on their own,
mm,
because then you come in, you may solve it here, but you don't create the value until you're down here, and in between there are too many contract partners. So the people that pay for it don't get the value.
mm.
So you have to make sure that you create the value within this sort of sphere that also gets the payoff.
I see.
It's
Yeah.
a huge problem within the industry. But anyways, I came to them with these analysis, and I sort of, at the top of my analysis list was where I'd sort of cross-referenced, where do we have other problems, and where it is it the most important to change.
Mm,
So lots of different areas, but that sort of at the top of my list was, I termed it energy, but
mm.
I really sort of, it was all about sustainability.
That's interesting.
So
So this was really, because you'd done research, you had this analysis, and you identified almost an opportunity, right? It was an opportunity of sort of a gap in the market where these or buildings were not sustainable enough, and there was a huge focus to be more sustainable. And you thought we can use technology
well,
to
it
make
was
it
more
easier.
sort of, it was actually almost the opposite.
Huh.
Was technology is going to disrupt the building and construction industries. It was blindingly obvious that technology was this huge enabler.
Mm-hmm.
So where did I see technology creating the biggest impact, where it was the most important, and so I brought more areas than one. I had a little shopping list of ideas, but at the top of my list was sustainability, and
Yeah.
that was at the top of their list too. So we sort of met here, where you sort of had this commonality in the fact that yes, technology is going to disrupt this industry. It is going to be digitized. These were fairly obvious certainties, even at
Mm,
this stage.
mm,
This wasn't news to anyone. So
mm,
it was more about like digging down, because you knew it's too big for technologies to just come in and automatically just solve everything. Ain't happening. There
mm.
were a few companies that really got a lot of funding that tried to do that. That was super, super interesting. I can't remember, but it's one company where they just went in and they just poured money and technology to trying to break down the different contract phases so that
Mm,
they could extract all the payoffs
mhm.
from having technology here. But it was just a smidgen too soon.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, but anyways, yeah, we aligned on the fact that technology was this enabler. It was going to disrupt the industry. And the most important place to disrupt was within sustainability. And the
right.
most important place to speed up
Mhm,
was within sustainability.
mhm.
So it really was more that than sitting down and ferreting out some areas that we were going to get rich from.
Yeah, I see. And
That wasn't the driving factor.
Renata, so up until this point, you had never been an entrepreneur, and all of a sudden you were saying to yourself, "I'm going to start this own company. I'm going to do this business." What was that transition like for you, going from typical job, right? Your executive C-level position to now having your own business. What was that like for you, starting all this up?
The worst bit was before I met the investor, because then it's incredibly lonely. And these are not my terms. I'm borrowing them from someone, but I'm a talker thinker, not a thinker talker. So
Same, yeah, me
yeah.
too. Yeah.
So I enjoy having someone to talk with, to
Hmm.
spar with, to disagree with,
Hmm.
to sort of challenge each other and that kind of thing. Sitting there and just pulling stuff out of my own head without having someone to bounce off of
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
excruciating,
Yeah.
if I can be honest.
I
Yeah.
can imagine. I mean, I just to kick in here, I try to figure out a way to spar with myself, and I just say, "Hey, man, how are you doing today?" Right? And then I would have an internal conversation with myself to simulate what it's like to talk to someone else, just because I work better, I think better that way. So I can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, I didn't go that far. I didn't start talking to myself, but you do. No,
Just
I'm
no
joking.
friend
I'm joking.
But yeah, so this was before you got the investors, and then
Yeah. So when I got the investors, I just made a very, very conscious decision that I'm going to turn up to work every single morning, and just have somewhere to go, to be social, to
hmm
have someone to spar with, to sort of have progress. And I got that team feeling again, which was really such a huge, huge help. And then we just sort of built stone by stone, hired our first employee sort of beside me right after the summer, I think, or
hmm
right before the summer. I can't remember when the contract was signed. He's
but
still
around
here.
that period, yeah,
Yeah, he's still here, which I'm super proud about. And
amazing.
we've had some ups and downs together, which has been such a great experience. It's been so important for the company. And yeah, and then we just started building stone by stone, and got some new people in different ways, made some changes to what we were focusing on, like zeroed in on existing buildings, even though we could see there was a huge potential and problem also with the building projects. But we just said, yeah, no, we have to pick one. So went for existing buildings. Yeah, uh, got industry players involved. So you get
Hmm
the feedback,
hmm
and had this wonderful resource from Norse Lab, who was just a really good process oriented person that really enabled us to sort of ask the questions that we needed to ask, not the
hmm
questions that we wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I get so enthusiastic that I will just convince people that my idea is wonderful, even though maybe it ain't. So it was very,
Yeah.
very important. She's like, you're not allowed to start talking about what you think is the right thing. You just need to ask this one question and shut up.
And what was that one question?
No, it was different. It was different for each of them. And I felt really rude sometimes because I just started peppering these people with
Mm,
questions
mm.
without giving them any sort of response. It
No
wasn't a
feedback.
conversation at all. And you kind of feel a little rude when you do that.
Mm.
So no explanation, the less said before you have the conversation and allow them to sort of give their input unfiltered without you influencing them in any way, shape, or form, the more valuable it is.
Yes.
So that was hugely important.
Wow. And one thing that you mentioned there, Renata, was that the transition was obviously a lot better once you got a team that you could, go into inspire every morning, and you built it a little brick by brick, is what you've said, right? Like step by step, essentially. In terms of facing challenges, in terms of building the business, did it feel like a walk in the park, or did you face a lot of resistance along the way there?
At this stage, not that much resistance. I mean, in the beginning, it was very much open doors. Whomever
Mm,
I called had something useful or were trying to be helpful. Some of them maybe gave me help that I wasn't able to use. I called the head of Google in Norway. She was like, I support you here. Let me give you this for free. That normally costs a lot of money.
hmm.
Unfortunately, I wasn't tech savvy enough to really use
Use,
that.
utilize it.
Yeah, utilize it. But yeah, no. I'd say timing wise, it was one of those that was a period where people had not been called 10, 15, 20, 50 times by someone who wanted to help them solve their problems. And I also had a few contacts within the industry, so I could call some of my friends to say, oh, do you have any advice? Who should I call? This is what we're trying to do. And I'd get like, yeah, cool, this one, they should be good. So it was still at the early stages of prop tech.
Hmm.
Prop tech was a term I hadn't heard about before, well after I started Varig.
Hmm. And that's property technology.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
And then Contech, construction technology.
Can't. Yeah.
But prop tech has sort of become this catch-all phrase ish.
If I hadn't known what you were doing, I would have probably thought of PropTech as proprietary technology or something like that.
Oh, really? I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about that. Well,
I
there
don't
you
know.
go.
Property technology.
Yep.
So in terms of then, it wasn't too big of a challenge, but you must have faced certain challenges along the way, right? I mean, a lot of the business owners that I talk to, at least, they talk about cash, could be people, could be acquiring clients, retaining clients, even managing churn.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you have
And
any?
yes, all of those. All of those. We've been doing this now for 5 years. So obviously, all of those. Every company, not just startups, face those challenges every now and again.
Was there, however, one that was sort of like a make or break for you? Was there one that was, like, if we don't solve this, we're going down?
There's been a few of them, but they've all been solvable. Sort
Mm,
of, and we've by no means made it. We're still a growing company. We're growing up in sort of a small fish pond.
mm,
So it's you sort of don't get the exponential growth that can happen in the US is by no means as easy to achieve in a small pond like ours
mm,
because there just ain't that many companies. So you can't stay narrow for as long as you need to. At least that's our experience. So we're not at break even yet. We're fairly close to it, but before you're at break even, you can't really rest on your laurels and say we made it. That's not how it works. So it's I will say that it's by no means any sort of less challenging now
mm,
than it was 2, 3 years ago. It's
mm,
just different challenges and almost bigger challenges
mhm.
because you have to build systems.
Yes,
You have to build repeatable systems.
yes,
And it's hard knowing when does something work. Have you tried it long enough for it to work?
yes.
So that's the thing, the sort of making sure that you don't flip from
Mhm.
thing to thing, and consistency is the name of the game, and doing the right thing for long enough.
Yes.
That's as challenging as being this enthusiastic, painting pictures, building visions. In many ways, it's challenging to do that too, but they're challenging in a different way. I remember when the biggest challenge was defining the MVP. It was really
Mm-hmm.
hard. It was really hard,
Yeah.
but we made it and we
Yeah.
built it on time and at budget. I'd say a little helped by Corona, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of you had more time, or how did Corona helping you build an
There were
MVP?
no distractions
I see.
for the development team.
I see.
They had no other jobs coming in that someone needed them to look at. They had this project,
Yeah.
and it was well enough defined that it was buildable, and we could go out and start selling the MVP straight away. And
Hmm.
we got two paying clients on fairly fast.
Wow,
That
it's amazing.
was looking back. That was fairly sort of fast, actually,
I mean,
considering.
I can
Yeah,
imagine it was a pretty big win as well, like a good feeling closing those two clients fast
yeah,
with an MVP.
yeah. I mean, it didn't feel super fast at the time, but looking back, it was fast.
Yeah.
So that was good, and then we built sort of stone by stone and tried to learn with our clients and evolve the product with our clients. And then looking back, we always sort of aimed for the moon, and we very reached it, but we got much higher than we gave ourselves credit for at the time. We were
Hmm.
always super ambitious on behalf of our own targets. So yeah, that's a really good attitude to have in the beginning, but after a while you need to start reaching your targets. So
Yes, yes,
it's a good feeling when you do. We've started
yes.
sort of setting targets now that are sort of very data based and much more sort of repeatable and building structures and that kind of thing. So
I
it's
think
yeah, it's
when
fun.
it comes to setting goals and targets as well, I always say, aim for the moon, especially if you're new and you're starting out, because you're going to get a lot closer. And this is, of course, if you don't know where your limit is.
Yeah.
It's like you're saying, once you've sort of done this for a while and you know where you are, don't set unrealistic expectations because you know that your growth is going to be like this. But when you're starting off, aim
Mm.
for the moon because chances
Yeah.
are you're going to get a lot closer than you think,
Yeah.
if you went lower. The one thing I wanted to ask you about as well, Renata, is what is the awareness level of the market like? When it comes to selling something like this, are they, where are they on the scale?
It's extremely variable.
Hmm.
You have some that understand sustainability and reporting and all of those bits almost better than we do. And we know what we do very well.
Hmm.
I'm not the sustainability expert. Well, we have one on the team and we work very closely together. And I'm by no means born yesterday when it comes to this, but it's just a huge area of expertise that builds on many, many sub areas of expertise. So to expect the industry to have this under their belt is absolutely no, you can't. I will say it seems now that most, more than half at least, has understood that, okay, this is happening whether we like it or not. It's probably a risk not doing something about it. Do we really care about it? Not all that much, but
Hmm.
we just don't want to lose money because we didn't
Hmm.
think about it at all. Not everyone is there yet, but that's the sort of general feeling right now. But yeah, you have the superstars that are ahead of everyone else. And then you have the rest just following along with the sort of almost a curve like superstars. And then you sort of get, and then you had taper off again to the people that really don't care, don't want to spend any time or energy on it, and just sort of have made it a point to,
To
nope,
not.
that's not for us.
But the
Yeah,
main,
those are few and far between in Europe, I'd say.
yeah, yeah. It sounds like the main people who are kind of in the middle there, they see not investing in this or focusing on this as a reduction in income, right? Like it affects their costs essentially. So
Yeah,
that's
and I
like
mean,
the
they are
pain they've
wrong.
associated. Yeah,
I know I'm incentivized to say this,
of course.
but there are quite a lot of supporting numbers now made from Savills, CBRE, etc., at least within the office market in Europe, that say that, yeah, return on investment ain't as high if you don't care about sustainability at all. And I'm paraphrasing like mad, but there is support for that statement. And there are strong indications that you are taking on a risk financially by not having any sort of control at all on this blob of sustainability for
And
buildings.
for someone who owns a building, I mean, I don't have a huge audience of building owners here, but if someone did not know why that was not the case, what would you tell them? Like, you should focus on this because why? Why should they focus on it?
Well, I'm trying to think of the most important bit to say. First and foremost, we're in the lucky situation that making buildings more sustainable when they're already built normally means that they use less energy, which costs less. You reduce waste costs and you reduce your water cost. So
Mm,
they're fairly sort of no-brainer things to focus on anyways, if you want happy tenants, because
mm,
these are normally tenant costs.
mm,
So in a competitive market, if you want the high-end tenants, you don't have a choice.
mm.
Then you need some sort of certificate on your building that it's green. Let's call it green. I know it's a wishy-washy term, but for simplicity's sake.
Yes.
And then you need to be able to provide them with data,
Mm,
because the likelihood of those high level tenants, the ones that really pay the high prices, they have to report, because sustainability reporting for a lot of companies is no longer optional. They
mm,
have to, as a part of their yearly reporting, to get their annual reports like written off by the auditors.
mm,
There are quite strict demands on sustainability reporting to be a part of that now for a
mm,
lot of companies. And then that's like the first wave we're seeing now. And then the second wave will expand the parameters of who have to report. And the third wave is defined now. And then they've sort of signaled that there will be a fourth and a fifth wave as well.
mm.
So it's coming your way whether you like it or not. You might as well start thinking about it, because it's not that hard when you sort of split it up into manageable sort of bits. But if you have to do it all at once, it's a
It's a pain.
huge job the first
Yeah,
time if you've
yeah.
not touched it. So
And that's
it's good
where,
for the economy. It makes makes your paying client happier, and you're reducing your financial risk to
yeah.
summarize.
And that's then where you come in, right? Where you provide
Yeah,
them with the tools to make this as easy as possible to do this reporting.
yeah.
You,
We don't sort of, we get the data from the buildings,
hmm.
and then we have, I think without being too bullish, I can say we have the most automated reports, the most done reports, readily available reports
Done
straight from the
for you.
system
Yeah.
on the market.
Yes.
So it really gets the data and professionalizes your reporting and reduces time spent on reporting significantly. And yeah, that's the main offering that I'd say is the starting point. And then we sort of facilitate we need a strategy. Oh, how are we going to improve? We help you with the system to manage that. But that's the
Hmm.
next step. First
Hmm.
step is always get the data.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be. It could also be about have a strategy, but it's hard to have a strategy if you don't know where you're starting.
Yeah. Yeah. The data allows you to sort of understand that, right?
Hopefully, yes.
Yes.
If you need help with that, just call us. Either we know someone close to you, or we can help you.
Amazing. And, my thought here about you and your business as well is that you've positioned yourself, sort of at the right time, right? Where there is so much more focus now, at least this is my view, there is a lot more focus now on sustainability, right? And ESG, you got net carbon zero, what is it, 2050,
Yeah.
cars, policies, it's in a lot of industries. And I think that a lot of companies and properties, people in real estate as well, are going to look at this and think, you know what? Also, new buildings are going to think, we need a system to do this reporting. We need to make it as simple as possible. And that's where you can come in.
Yeah.
In terms
That's
of
all.
in terms of young entrepreneurs, people who are going into business, should they focus on sustainability? Is that important for them when considering starting a business? Should it be a part of their decision making framework?
I think you at least have to take it into account, like, as you say, decision making framework. I will also say that it is an incredibly, well, becoming an incredibly washed out terminology.
How
It
so?
means everything to no one right now. And all companies have something to do with sustainability in their catchphrases, whether it's direct or indirect. So to focus on sustainability in and of itself as a terminology to work from is not the best one. We're
Mm,
trying to find other words to use because
it's
it's kind
tricky.
of been overused,
Yeah.
and it means very little, to be honest.
It's not defined very well then.
No, it's not defined very well at all. It's just
Mm,
the one that everyone uses. So you kind of can't afford not to say something about it. But I wish I had better terminology. But then you end up with something too specific again. So you have to
mm,
cater to those masses and the words that most hear. So you sort of there's a catch 22 in there somewhere. I just haven't figured it out yet.
mm-hmm.
So if you figure it out, let me know.
Yeah.
So if you're a fresh entrepreneur right now, sort of can't afford not to take it into consideration, but I'd also be careful about focusing too much on it because
Mm,
it's there are a lot of people looking into this right now because
mm,
it's going from a nice to have to a must have.
mm,
So you need to think it's kind of like AI.
mm.
AI in and of itself, super interesting. You have to sort of think about it. You can't disregard it. It's in that box of you can't disregard it. AI, sustainability. But to sort of go from those two terms and think I'm going to build something is then you're probably going to end up with something that yeah, I can't see that being a good starting place. I'd say start with something that you
Sustainable
know.
AI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, Search, look it up on the internet. I guarantee you will find so many companies saying
Those two
exactly that.
keywords together, right?
Yeah,
Sustainable
yeah, yeah.
AI. Yeah.
Sustainable AI, and you're going to save the world somehow. And I'm being a little like blasé about it, but not saying it's not true that it's probably exactly that's going to happen.
Mm,
But it needs to be used. Those two words mean so many different things to many different people, and
yeah.
they're not magic.
No,
It needs to be something useful.
they need to be used as well by the right person, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
you could have two totally different people, one of them extremely competent and knowledgeable when it comes to the use of AI. Another person has no idea how to use it. Same tool, very different outcomes, you know? Um, and I'd look at sustainability in the same way. To me, I would not be able to define it very well. Sustainability to me is just to reduce the damaging effects on the planet. That's where I would sort of, how do you
but it's not
save
that.
it,
It's not
right?
that easy.
It's not even
No,
that.
it takes into account what you're describing, damaging effect on the planet. So that's the environmental part of
Mm,
sustainability.
mm,
Then you have the economic side of sustainability, and then you have the governance or the people side of sustainability. It's like companies can't exist without making money.
yes.
You need to be so sustainable can also mean that it makes money.
Mm,
The goal is to be profitable, but don't hurt the planet, do something good for the planet, and don't like exploit people
mm.
or make be bad for people somehow. So that's sustainability. And
So
we
he's,
are
he's
mostly the E part and maybe the governance part of sustainability.
mm,
So the environmental side is where we have the most weight, and the governance side, we make it much, much, much easier to share
mm.
and govern and document.
And what do you think is going to be the future of sustainability? I want to sort of add AI because you do mention
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you have a strong focus on
It can't
automations.
help.
Let's start off with sustainability. Where do you see society and the world heading when it comes to the focus that we have as a collective on this? And how important is this going to be?
Well, right now, Europe is obviously sort of leading the way. We are seeing some of the sort of goals and the ambitions being rolled back slightly.
Rolled back. Why?
Quite a lot of companies are rolling back because they still have to make money.
Mm.
Being sustainable but bankrupt does no one any good.
Mm.
So then you're rolling back to sort of how much money are we going to put into becoming more sustainable? Then you have to roll back some of it. So we're
Mm.
seeing some rollbacks. I mean, it's not the easiest time for most companies. You're not making as unless you produce weapons, you're not making as much money. It's the interest rates are high. I mean, in a historical sense, maybe not high, but they're much higher than they were the last 10, 15 years, maybe
Yes.
12. So it's a challenging time for a lot of companies right now. And
Mm.
even the most profitable companies are cutting back on expenses. And it feels, I'm quite sure that well, people are being given sort of precedence maybe over maybe some big investment into something that is cutting edge, but you don't have proof that it will give all the effects that you think it will give, etc. So you'll hold back on that one for a few years so you don't have to fire 50 more people. I mean, these are the considerations that companies that are fairly big have to take into account now.
Mm.
And you see quite a lot of layoffs. New investments are being cut. So
It makes a lot of sense.
the speed in which sustainability has been sort of rolling at, I think, will at least not increase,
Mm.
unfortunately. But
It's
there's
not
a
regulated,
sensibility in this. Yeah,
is it? It's not regulated?
it is. It
Can
is
they,
regulated
because I mean,
within the EU.
because can the companies roll back, you know?
No, they can roll back what they're doing to
Mm.
improve, to reach, to sort of support the Paris Agreement
I
and
see.
the targets. But no one has regulated that this and this company has to cut their emissions by this much by then.
I
They've
understand.
set a common target and they set aside money for it. Like, let's use the UK as an example. They've not tightened up their demands on their like they were meant to. They've rolled
Yes.
back some of the changes as well. So yes, for most it will feel like now everything's coming into play. But there's a lot of stuff also that is being held back. So I
Mm.
don't think it will hit as hard as it could have without the problems in the world.
Mm.
Problems in the world will slow down the focus on sustainability,
Mm. Mm.
without a doubt.
Mm.
And you also have huge like areas like let's call the USA. They're not making this mandatory.
A priority, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have Article 9
What
in
is that?
New York, which has been implemented and obviously has had a good effect, but at the same time, it's not been rolled out anywhere else.
What is Article
So
97?
Article 97 is a uh, article that applies to buildings
Okay.
where they have to. Oh God, it's been a while now since I read it. It sets demands on CO2 footprint for buildings, both in use stage and in building stage. So it's quite a sort of you need to have the complete oversight over what's this environmental impact or CO2 footprint of the building.
Mm.
And absolutely, a lot of rules are being tightened, and there are more demands on buildings lowering their energy consumption, and they're thinking of new ways of measuring what the impact of building a building is, as opposed to tearing it down and building a new one, etc.
Mm.
So yeah,
That's where your
within
company would play a good role, right? Providing the reports for the companies who have to measure their CO2
absolutely,
and the carbon
absolutely. That's one of the core
footprint.
things we do. We do that per building, not just sort of at this company level that a
Yes.
lot of other systems will do. We'll do it per building. So that way, if you have to report to your banks that have obviously lent money to the building, so it gets you're allowing for me to get quite complicated and talking a lot of details about sustainability right now. And I have a tendency to go into too much detail. So
It's
stop
interesting.
myself.
No,
Yeah,
it's very interesting. I mean,
yeah,
I am certainly learning more about this whole concept, sustainability, right? I mean, you're
yeah.
an expert. You have a company that focuses on it. So obviously,
Yeah,
I have to take
I
the
know a fair
opportunity
bit
to,
about it.
yeah.
Yeah, I do. And also, but within Europe, Absolutely. You can't get away from it. You have to think about it. And you're taking on a real financial risk asset wise if you don't have this under a reasonable amount of control. But at the same time, I think that the front runners that really sort of did the job of reporting on these new schemes, that like the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, that is the sort of framework that says what companies have to report on sustainability as part of the yearly reports by when. They've gone through the reporting frameworks underneath it, that is called the European ESRS. Let's just call it ESRS. And it's huge. The complexity is mind-boggling.
Yes.
And you really, really, really can't do it without a system. It's kind of even written in there. You can't do this without a system. So
and
it's a catch. There's a nice sort of symbiotic thing here, because they could have done it without the emergence of technology at the level that we're at right now, because it would be unmanageable.
Yes, but the verdict then, like, or at least what you're saying is sustainability. The focus there is slowing down slightly compared to the speed at which it started at.
Yeah, I'd say it's not necessarily slowing down. It's just not speeding up at the rate that one would hope. Now, I may be slightly too sort of realistic in this sense, but it's not going to stop. And it's keeping speed, but it's not speeding up.
And what about AI then? How does this affect our focus on sustainability? And how does AI, two-part question, so how does that affect sustainability? And the second part is, how do you use AI in your business?
Well, AI is interesting. It's kind of still in its infancy. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool. I use AI tools a lot, both sort of on a personal, sort of on my personal tasks within Varig. But within sustainability, I've not seen it applied. I've seen some examples where you use AI to come up with ways of making this world that Varig exists in better. But so far, I've seen it applied at very specific areas. And some of the issues here is large quantities of quality data. You can get large quantities of data. You can get quality data, but very, very, very rarely can you get large quantities of quality data. If you want to train your AI, you really do need to do it with you need to have a very clear objective of what you want to achieve. And AI is pretty decent, but it has a tendency to make stuff up. And really doesn't fly when the reporting is audited. AI is normally black box. You can't audit black box. So we have some areas that I don't necessarily want to go into too much detail with, because it's...
Of course.
I'm not sure I want to share it right now.
No worries.
And we have some plans, but at the moment, we're hurrying a little slowly to make sure that we apply AI in a way that is not just a fun gadget. It could be. I quite like it as a fun gadget, and it makes it more enjoyable. And quite honestly, making these tools more enjoyable and fun to use is important.
Yes.
I'm not disregarding that. It's actually hugely important. But it needs to be weighed up against, what do we use money on? We don't have an endless pool of money.
Of course.
So you need to prioritize what's the most important thing you can do. And right now, within our space, having governance, sort of the auditable reports, is more important right now than gimmicks.
That makes sense.
So auditability and being transparent and not having black box solutions is really important.
So you're taking a more slow approach in your business, not to be too hasty there. You want to make sure that what you implement works. And it also needs to be cost effective for you guys, considering that, you can't just throw a bunch of money on AI and be like, okay, let's try and make this work, right? You have to be very
Yeah.
methodological and precise and accurate about
And
what
it's
you
not to
do.
say that we're not working on solutions where AI is utilized to provide the product,
Because
because that's
it's more
probably,
more automations that you're using it for and
yeah, it's more, yeah,
simplifying
automations
systems
we've
and
got.
work processes.
Yeah, automations is not a problem. That one we're actually really good at. It's more the fact that AI is used on the bits where it makes us more scalable.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I
AI is a
see.
tool like any other tool. So it's not necessarily about being slow in that sense. It's just not, it's AI is like, yeah,
Mm.
to be used as a tool, not just because it's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
That goes away
And
quite fast.
true. And for your business, what is your vision in 5, in 10 years? Where do you hope to be?
Oh, that's a huge question. Right now, our vision is really providing our service to the end client. Our vision is much more about our clients than what we get.
Mm.
It's about sort of making sure that buildings become more sustainable. It's about making sure that the buildings that we have in our system become more sustainable. So we track one of the KPIs that we measure our success in have we across our clients managed to reduce their CO2 impact?
Mm.
Yeah, or just by getting the data. Sometimes what you measure gets focused. So
Mm.
we see sort of an initial effect by just having Varig.
Yes.
You will reduce your energy consumption, you will reduce your CO2 impact just by installing it. And it's just a process of awareness.
Mm.
And then if you don't follow through, that will sort of, it won't continue without work. But you can see, I think we sort of see a significant 5 to 10% energy reduction consumption, and then 10 to 15% reduction in CO2 footprint
Wow.
just from getting a system.
In terms of money, how much is that for a building, for example?
Oh, again, whoo, difficult question.
Depends on the size, of course, right? I
Depends on the
assume.
size of the building.
Yeah.
Depends on where in the world the building is. To reduction in and of itself doesn't really. I can't. Depends if it's reduced
Yeah.
waste or if it's. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have that number because if I had, it'd be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem. But okay, so it's the KPI that is very important for you guys is to look at how much carbon footprint
What's our impact? Yeah.
what's your impact essentially?
Yeah, what's our impact? So we want to be impact negative. We have a CO2 footprint by existing, and we want to reduce the CO2 footprint by delivering Varig with more than we have by existing.
Wow.
So far, I think we've been impact negative more or less the last 3 years.
Mhm. And what for you right now then, what is the next step in your business? Like the next focus for you guys?
Next focus is reaching a break even.
How do you do that?
You keep really strict control on cost, and then you sell what you already have.
Uh-huh. So
We have a really
increase
strong
sales.
system, so it's increased sales. And we have a SaaS model, so it's obviously also about keeping churn low. It's
Do you
good at the moment.
Yes. I was going to ask a question, but I forgot it. Last question for you, Renata. What advice would you give someone who wants to start a business and is might be inspired by the mission that you're on? Although it's not to, you mentioned that it was an opportunity for you, but it's still very mission driven. It's sustainability is today. It's like you said, it's very much like this focus on our planet, but it's still mission driven. What advice would you give any entrepreneur who wants to do something?
I'd say knock on a few doors. You have the good old ask for advice, but
I'm
that
asking
one's a
you.
bit old, to be honest. I've been asked for, in the beginning, the first two or three that ask you for advice, you answer. And then after a while, you just see that, oh God, yeah, I don't have time for this. Not to be rude, but it's, yeah, it's a tricky one. You sort of have to. That one has been used by many, many, many people. So if you, the good old ask for advice, be prepared that you may not get answers, and it's not because they don't want to answer you. It's because they answered the 5 to 10 before you,
Mm.
and after a while, you just don't have time. I think you need something hard to define. I think you need to, if it's so obvious to you that it needs to kind of be something obvious that you just kind of want to be a part of. And if no one else is doing it, then you call a few people that you think this will be interesting for, and you give them a little bit of a spiel about what you're thinking and why you think this is useful. Test it out. But if you just want to be a part of a startup journey, get a job at a startup. To start something just to start something, that's a tall order today. You need to have something you're willing to sort of go a little bit all in on because it's just so obvious. I didn't necessarily want to, I wasn't driven by me having to start this company. It was more, why is no one doing this? It's so obvious. I want to be part of this. No one else is doing it. Okay, I'll just give it a shot. So if you have something that you just see that this is so obvious, why is no one doing this? That's when you start calling people and find out if there's someone who's willing to bite and who's willing to give you the time of day. If you get a lot of yeses and a lot of open doors, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
And I will give one piece of advice that someone gave to me very, very early on when I was like cagey and I didn't want to tell anyone because I had this wonderful idea. And she said, don't worry about it. No one's going to steal your idea. It's they don't invest in your idea. They invest in you because you had the idea. And the likelihood of this idea being that wonderful is quite low, but there's a seed of something there. So don't be afraid to just discuss your idea with people. And okay, I may be wrong. Someone may steal it, but the likelihood of you making something happen with it is much higher if you discuss it with someone. Okay, there's a likelihood someone might steal it, but I don't know. The likelihood of it, someone wanting to support you making it happen is higher than them stealing it, in my opinion. But don't sue me.
It is very true, though, what you're saying. I've heard that one, and I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Renate?
So that's maybe, last 2 cents for me.
Renate, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It was a real pleasure to talk to you, to learn more about sustainability as well as, well, everything that you do with Varig. So thank you a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.